You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we have a very special guest, and I'm super excited. Marcia Clark was the lead prosecutor in the trial of the century, the 1995 O.J. Simpson murder trial. After the trial, Marcia decided to pursue a childhood dream, writing murder mysteries, and is now a New York Times bestselling author, and in October 2022 released a suspense novel called The Fall Girl. Marcia, how are you?
I'm good, Benny. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for being here, and I thank you, and congratulations on all of your success.
Well, thanks, Benny, and thanks for having me.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. So just to let you know, with Lawyer Stories, we usually talk about why the person went to law school, like where they're from, their background, like what they're up to now. And I know you've been writing some amazing novels. So can you just give us like a background? Like where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I mean, I grew up all over the country. We moved and moved and moved. My father worked for the federal government. So I was born in Berkeley, California, and then we moved a bunch of times. I'm trying to remember where we went.
Yeah.
We moved to Washington State. We moved to Texas, then moved back to California, wound up in Southern California, moved up to Northern California, moved to Michigan, moved to Maryland, moved to New York, then moved back to Los Angeles.
Okay, so that wasn't really like a cut and dry question. You're sort of like
yeah, that's so easy.
different places. Okay. So just moving on to law school, like, can you tell us what your law school experience was like? And along that, did you have any inspirations or mentors?
So I think I wonder if this is typical or atypical, because honestly, I didn't mean to go to law school. This was not a childhood dream of mine.
Right.
I had no intent. I majored in poli-sci with a specialization in international relations, particularly the Middle East, wanted to work for the State Department in the field. And at that time, especially, but I understood years later that it was still that way. They were not interested in hiring girls to work in the field.
Right.
They asked me if I could type.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
It was not good. And I thought, okay, so this is not happening. And then I had to decide what to do, took a year or two off and bounced around and then thought, I got to do something. This is not working. And that's how I wound up choosing law school.
It's amazing. So when they say, like, can you type? Like, what's your visceral reaction to that?
It was like, so you want me to be a secretary? But I graduated from UCLA with honors in poli-sci. Yeah. I speak 3 languages.
Yeah.
You don't think this might be helpful to you
right.
at all?
Right.
Apparently not. So that was that. Amazing. And it just changed, it really did change the course of my life. I mean, that was that. And I had to really think of what else to do. And how I wound up picking law school is really a good question. And I really didn't take it very seriously because I remember going out and partying the night before I took the LSAT.
Yeah.
And showed up a little hungover. And back then we had to fill in those little bubbles.
Right.
The little bubbles were dancing all over the page.
That's hilarious.
You always
think like you didn't fill in the bubble completely, but then you get the Antron back and you did fine. I think they really over like tell you like you really have to like be inside the lines. I don't really believe that that's totally true, but that's fun. And in your book, like in The Fall Girl, you see like this character who she has her how do you say it? She has her thing of like tequila or whiskey or vodka, and she's like hungover going into like the going into work a lot, like sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting. So obviously you did pretty well on the exam.
I guess I never checked, you know what I mean? I applied to one law school, went there because it was local. It was
Yeah.
all very, it was so haphazard, Benny. It was like, okay, Southwestern's right there. It's accredited. I don't have to take a baby bar. That sounds good.
It's always like the people who like go in, oh, I got hammered last night, and they go and they do like the best on all these tests. I mean, thanks a lot, by the way, for that. Okay. So tell me about like your inspirations or mentors. It sounds like maybe this was, you said it was haphazard. You kind of just went. Was there anybody along the way in the legal field that was a mentor?
I mean, I don't know about mentor. I didn't really have much opportunity for that.
Yep.
Um, but I was certainly influenced by, what by my teachers, my professors. And it was really interesting. Like within a month of my first year, I knew that it was going to be criminal law. It was just
Okay.
very clear to me, this is where I'm going. My teacher, my professor in Crim Law 1 was a former prosecutor.
Okay.
Um, but my teacher who taught me evidence was a public defender. So I got kind of a nice balance between the two of them. And they were both really good professors and they were inspiring. And the only time I kind of had a hesitation mark about criminal law was when I took intellectual property. And I thought, well, this is interesting. We were
Okay.
studying stuff like the Maltese Falcon. And it was just, that was fascinating. But ultimately, I thought, criminal law was where it was at. And
What was it
I
about
don't
criminal
regret it.
law that you really enjoyed?
I guess it was the stories, and also the high stakes of it all. I mean, this
Yeah.
really is life or death. It
It's
really, really
amazing.
is. It's not just, as my contracts professor said, how many zeros you add after the three. This was the real, you know, how very serious. Not that it couldn't be very important how many zeros you have to add after the three. I mean, that matters too, but it was just where I was drawn.
And you mentioned the evidence thing, and I feel like, even watching the People versus OJ and like trials, like you really have to be quick on your feet. It's like a game, you got to know the exceptions. You got to be able to, you know, object and all that sort of thing. And I mean, that's a real big skill. What do you have any advice for somebody who's trying to get better at trial work?
I do. Let me just say, I'm forever indebted to my evidence teacher, professor. Why do I keep saying that? Anyway, the guy who taught us evidence, who made us memorize the hearsay exceptions, and there were
Yeah.
several, and also memorize objections and the bases for them, so that he goes, you're not going to have time to think of this in the moment, and so you have to memorize it so that it's muscle memory, and you
Wow.
go to court and you just know it's and I'm in California. So evidence code 1220, party admission, evidence code 1235, prior inconsistent statement. I mean, these are the things. And that was the most helpful thing. I can't stress this enough. If you're going to do trial work, know this stuff. Also know what your objections are. Like I see people very frequently. I'm working in appellate work right now, do court appointed appeals for the indigent on felony convictions. And how often I see objections that are just not on point. And it's easy to
Okay.
get these right. And so, like, people throw around speculation or lack of foundation when it's
Right.
completely inappropriate. Learn what they should be, and you'll probably try a better lawsuit if you do that.
So I,
So
so I,
those are your weapons. You know what I mean? That's your
right.
arrows in the quiver.
So I guess my follow-up would be like, if I think I read somewhere that, you felt in the OG case, like, um, Judge Ito, like, might have gotten a lot of these things not correct or not accurate.
Yeah.
Are you seeing more judges getting these objections, correct? Like you're kind of pointing out that they're not using the objections accurately. Do judges call that out, or are they not catching on to it?
The judges are calling it out. I
Okay.
mean, more often than not, the judges do know what's a valid objection, what has merit and what doesn't. Um,
Okay. Yeah, they should.
yeah, it's
I
it's
mean, they
it's pretty
should, right?
cool. So yeah, the things are better.
Yeah, no,
And there's a lot of lawyers that get it right. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but in terms of you were asking, what would I advise trial lawyers in terms of what to know and how to be prepared? The other thing is also be on top of case law. Be really on top of case law and make sure that when you walk into court, you know more than anyone else about your case. So between the law and the facts, you really want to be very accurate and very informed, because that is how you arm yourself. Otherwise, you really can miss a good objection. You can miss a good issue.
Wow.
I've definitely seen that happen, as well as the opposite, where they are on top of it and just really nail a great objection or nail a great issue. But it's good. You have to know that stuff.
So what would you say that, have you ever heard, like, if you don't have the law, argue the facts, if you don't have the facts, argue
Hmm.
the law? Do you think that that's an accurate statement or
To
theory?
a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, to a point. I mean, to finish that, what we used to say is, if you don't have the law, argue the facts. If you don't have the facts, argue the law. If you have neither one, kick the other side.
Huh. Okay.
So make fun of the prosecutor, make fun of the defense attorney, whatever. Um, yeah, I mean, look, especially as a defense attorney, not so much a prosecutor, because it's a different job. A prosecutor is there to see that justice is done, not just get a scalp on your belt.
Right.
So you're there to make sure that um, did I just appropriate? I didn't mean to appropriate by
No,
saying that.
I,
But what I mean is, you're not just there to get a badge of honor because you won a case. You're there to see that justice is done, that the truth comes out, that the defendant, you have the right guy, girl, whatever, and that you definitely get them convicted of what they really did, as opposed to going for the maximum you can possibly think of, because then you're going to, if you do go way past what the evidence shows on appeal, you will be vulnerable to attack.
right.
And, in the trial court itself, you can also be vulnerable to a loss of credibility. Judges want to be able to rely on at least the prosecutor to to do a fair job, to be, by fair, I mean even-handed, and prosecute the right person for the right thing. So I think that that would not be true saying for them, but for the defense, where they have to be a little bit more loose about going after whatever helps their client. They can do that.
Okay. Um, so what advice do you have for someone an attorney, a young attorney, or an attorney who wants to become a prosecutor or a public defender?
If you want to be a prosecutor, you have to bear in mind that you have a duty that goes above and beyond just being a zealous advocate. You have to be a zealous advocate who is um, focused on the right thing. You have to really want to do the right thing, be fair. That means that you don't hide evidence. That means that you examine witnesses correctly. You don't try and stretch the truth, and you don't try to push the envelope in terms of what you can prove. Be fair. From the defense point of view, you do have to be zealous advocates, and
Mhm.
I'm sure, there are defendants who are less fun to represent than others, and you still have to do the very best you can to take care of them. That's your job. That said, no one should be lying. No one should be misrepresenting the truth. Um, Really, it's up to everybody to take your duty as an officer of the court very seriously, and to be honest and forthright about what you're doing.
Totally. Wow. Thank you. So one more question really here that relates to the law. Like, what advice do you have for women in the courtroom? For example, what are some things you've learned from the OJ case that you can pass on to female attorneys?
Things have changed. They're much better now, believe it or not.
Good.
As much as people say, they're not, they are better. Judges are much less sexist. So are
Good.
defense attorneys. So, you know what I mean? As a prosecutor, I'm thinking there was an awful lot of sexism and gendered
Yeah.
behavior in the courtroom back then, much less so now. I would say, though, not to focus on that. If you happen to be in a courtroom where some party, whether it's the judge or the attorney on the other side, is behaving in a gendered manner, sexist manner, rise above, do your best to rise above, recognize that you have a party to represent, whether it's the people or the defendant or the client. That's more important, much more important than your sensibilities in this moment. You can certainly try to address the matter outside of court, but don't get distracted, I think, is my personal advice. Keep your eyes on the prize. This is about the lawsuit, not you. Yeah.
I love that. And it's interesting because I think I mentioned pre-show, like with the whole People versus OJ. it brings out all of these things that, like, as a 15 or 16-year-old, you don't really recognize. I mean, because people were looking at the verdict, they look at the big white Bronco racing down the street, the glove, like that's what they remember. They remember obviously Marcia Clark, but I mean, this really like showed you like what you were up against. I mean, socially, like not only just like all the lawyers and it really was. I think it's a really good piece so far. For someone like me to connect the dots who might not have totally been aware of the entire thing back then. So I think it's so important, and you've done like you're like such a hero and like truly inspirational for like women and everybody out there just trying to do an honest job. So let's get into your books. I know it's pretty amazing that you've written a lot of books. Tell us about The Fall Girl, which is an exhilarating legal thriller. I started it, I will tell you. First, a shout out to Rarebird Lit, nice people over there. So tell us a little bit about the book.
So The Fall Girl is my ninth novel,
Okay.
murder mystery novel. This focuses on actually two women. First of all, we meet Charlie. She was a public defender in Chicago and had to leave her job there because of a really harrowing experience that saddles her with enormous guilt, changes her identity, moves to California, and looks for as small a venue as she can find to change her point of view, and she becomes a prosecutor in Santa Cruz. Not really a small town, but smaller than she had been in. And she's hiding, basically. She's hiding in plain sight, changes her appearance and changes her identity,
Right.
And has to groove into being on the other side of the lawsuit, which is not easy for her. She winds up, though, doing very well, and then getting assigned to the star of the prosecutor's office, Erica,
Right.
On this major murder case. And that murder case winds up, these are two horses that are yoked together that are trying to go in opposite directions as Charlie discovers that Erica's got secrets that are nefarious. And Erica's wondering what's up with Charlie because she smells something off about her, not right. And so the two are spying on each other as they handle this lawsuit, which becomes more and more difficult for each of them to hide their secrets. And ultimately, it comes to a crashing conclusion.
I couldn't figure out, like, I've only gone through like a quarter. I think the book's 300 pages. But what happened to Charlie's parents? I know I kind of stopped when she got a call from Hannah, her little sister, and then I don't know, she's having like bad dreams, and I don't know. I guess I have to just like read further, or maybe I missed it. Maybe I was going too fast. But you don't have to tell us.
Okay.
Unless you want to tell us what happened. Is it later in the book, or did I miss it?
With the parents?
Yeah.
Oh, the parents are fine. The parents.
Oh, that's right. You know what? I read today that they just like bought their timeshare. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they have something going on, but that's not the major focus of the story. So don't worry about them. It's okay.
Right. No, it's not. It's not. I know. I'm sorry. I get caught up on these things. I know the major, focus is Erica and Charlie, that they're, and Erica, I think it's going to be interesting if you find out like if Erica actually finds out how talented Charlie is in a courtroom because of her past, her past life that she hasn't really told anybody about. If you develop that, I don't know yet. Again, I'm hanging on my seat. I have to go read the rest of it. So how did you come up with the name for that, the title?
Well, it has to do with the person that Erica believes is guilty of the murder they're trying.
Okay.
And so
right.
The Fall Girl is the defendant who is charged with the brutal stabbing death of her mother.
Right. Right. That's yeah. And then okay. I got into that. So and the way you wrote the book was pretty interesting. Like you flip back and forth between the different characters' point of views. I think Charlie's in the first person, Erica's in the third person. Like, what made you do that sort of a narrative choice?
I usually write in the first person. That's always been the first series, which is a Rachel Knight series, focuses on
Yep.
Rachel Knight, the prosecutor, and her buddies, and that was first person. Then I moved to Samantha Brinkman. That series was also first person, based on a criminal defense attorney, Samantha
Right.
Brinkman, who steps out of over the lines of legality frequently whenever
Yeah.
she thinks it's fair. So this time I think I just wanted to see what it was like to have two points of view. And in order to do that, toggle between Charlie and Erica. And that way also kind of play out the cat and mouse between the two of them, each one wondering what the other one is up to.
That's amazing. So you said you always wanted to write these books. Was this like long ago when you started having ideas about this?
This was really long ago when I was a little kid.
Okay.
I loved writing when I was like, I want to say 8, 9, 10, 11, that was really young. And then I think I just thought that can't be a serious job because how am I going to make a living? And that's why I think part of the reason I became a lawyer is because I really like indoor plumbing. So I didn't want to
Yeah.
risk it,
That's
So,
it is. Yeah.
and then after I left the DA's office, I had to figure out what else I could do. I didn't really know. And for a while, I did hosting and guesting and all that stuff on TV. And then thought,
Right.
but if I'm ever going to realize the dream, it's going to be now. And so I decided to try writing books. It was one of those things. It's now or never.
Yeah, that's amazing. So regarding the Fall Girl, like you mentioned the Rachel Knight and the Samantha Brinkman series. Like, why did you decide to make a standalone novel like this one?
It was time to try that. Really, it was one of these things. I've done this, I've done that. Let me try a standalone, you know, experimenting. I'm now working, I've now sold another book to Thomas and Mercer that's going to be nonfiction
Oh,
based on an old murder
congratulations.
case. And this has been an incredibly different ride, I have to say. It's it's been fascinating, and finding all the ways in which this defendant got screwed over by everyone, is a pretty big shocker, and I'm not easily shocked, I have to say.
Wow.
But yeah,
That's amazing.
that's
You have some
TBD.
great ideas. I mean, this is so intricate and like the detail is amazing in these books. Like, I definitely hope everybody goes out and buys your books, and especially the Fall Girl. This is I'm ready to go back later tonight or tomorrow and start and continue reading it. What uh, what advice like for storytelling do you have, whether in the courtroom or like writing a book?
The only thing I can say is they say write what you know.
Yep.
I'm not sure I agree with that, although it can make life easier. It can also be, I'm not sure what they call it. What is it? I'm not sure whether it's a rein or a harness,
Yep.
because if you stick to writing what you know, your imagination may be restricted by what you
Interesting.
know. And
Interesting.
so I think I always say write what you love. Whatever fascinates you, whatever really gets you passionate and excited, I would say write about that, because you can learn what you don't know. You can
Okay.
research, we have the interweb that
Yeah,
makes life a lot easier for
that's right.
writers. So you
That's
can
right.
learn things that you don't know, and you can certainly consult with people who do know better. I see a lot of mystery writers who obviously have no medical background writing really detailed, incredibly complicated stories about, some medical, issues. And I think they didn't know that. They had to consult with someone. So you can manage what you don't know, but you cannot manage what you don't love. If you don't have love for your subject, it's not going to happen.
Right, right. And I mean, obviously you have a love for it, and I mean, do you put a piece of past experiences in each of your novels?
Probably. I mean, it's hard to avoid, right? It's like putting yourself into the book. You don't consciously do it. I never consciously did it, but pieces
Yeah.
of people I've met, people I've known, pieces of myself certainly would be kind of subconscious, subliminal. I wouldn't do it on purpose, but I'm sure it sneaks in there because how do you avoid that?
Right.
It is
Like,
part of your experience.
yeah. So actually, there is a piece of the book where it's page 29 into chapter 3. Jurors believe what they want to believe, and no matter how hard we try to convince them that murderers come in all stripes and sizes, that you can't tell whether someone's a killer by the way they look or act in court. Jurors still consciously or subconsciously want to believe they can. It makes them feel safer. So that kind of, I don't know, that stuck out to me a little bit. Again, I know it's only page 29, but it's kind of, I just thought that was interesting. Only because I got like the OJ, like I'm watching the OJ thing and I'm thinking about that really on my mind. But
Yeah. I mean, look, that's something that prosecutors deal with all the time.
Yeah.
You have this baby-faced defendant sitting on the other side of counsel table, and he's dressed up in a sweater or, a crew neck sweater and, all that. And the jury looks over at him and goes, I don't think so. This doesn't look right. This doesn't fit. And it's tough. It definitely is a much more uphill battle when the defendant does not look like someone who would do this, whatever this is. So that certainly comes from experience, and you have to kind of get the jury to be aware that they're kind of resisting what's logical in the evidence because of the way the defendant looks. Everybody has bias. Everyone, myself included. The only bias that is a problem is the bias you're unaware of. If you know you have it, you can address it and you can say, okay, wait, I'm giving him a pass because he's pretty. Okay.
Interesting.
So let me set that aside for a minute and look at the evidence.
That's interesting. So regarding juries, like what's the first thing a lawyer should look at when they're going in and they have all these juries that they have to, they can dismiss some, like what are we looking at here?
It's different in every case. It really depends on your evidence, right? It depends on your witnesses, depends on your client, depends on, and that's impossible. I could not say, I always want this, or I always want that. It's very much is tied to your case. So, and ultimately, I mean, if you're a prosecutor, you want someone who's fair and smart enough to see through BS.
Right.
So, right. You want somebody who's level-headed and willing to put in the work to get to the truth. On the defense side, you want somebody who's got a lot of sympathy, in a general sense. But somebody who, you probably want someone who's persuadable,
Right. Makes sense. Thank you so much, Marcia Clark, for being here, author of The Fall Girl, and I really appreciate your time. I thank you so much. Wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Benny.
Thanks, Marcia. Take care.
You too.